I am sensitive to the fact that for some, Mother's Day is not an easy day. Some didn't have very good mothers. Some never knew their mothers. Some have had recently mothers that passed away. And still others never became a mother. For whatever reason, some don't enjoy Mother's Day, and I get that. But let me say this. All of us here, whether we were raised in healthy or unhealthy homes, are all products of motherhood. We're all children of mothers, children who needed care, who needed love, who needed attention. Lots and lots of attention. If you've ever been around children, you noticed how kids demand attention. The tremendous desire to be seen. Right, Mama? They're at the playground. They're at the skating rink. They're at home doing a new dance move, and this is what you hear. Hey, Dad, watch. Watch me. Mom, look at me. Look, Mom, look at me. Over and over and over again. And the attentive mom or dad stop what they're doing, put down their newspaper, if they still read a newspaper, and watch their children over and over and over again. The flip side of that coin is that mothers often feel invisible. If you are a stay-at-home mom, much of your day is spent alone. Much of your work goes unnoticed. And when your family does come home, do they even see you then? Hillary Price from the People's Church in Toronto explains it like this. It all began to make sense. The blank stares, the lack of response, the way one of the kids will walk into the room while I am on the phone and ask to be taken to the store. And I'm inside thinking, hello, can you see me? I am on the phone. Obviously not. No one can see if I'm on the phone or cooking or sweeping the floor or even standing on my head in the corner because no one can see me at all. I am invisible. Mothers can feel that way. Nobody sees them. Nobody understands them. Nobody cares for them. They work all day long without a single, thanks, Mom. Well, magnify that. Magnify that feeling by 100, and you will know or begin to know how Hagar felt. Hagar felt misused, abused, confused. Now, I have to say this. Hagar is not your typical Mother's Day story. She's not a heroine like Miriam or Deborah or Ruth or Mary Magdalene or Priscilla or Mary, the mother of Jesus. She is a nobody. But God saw her as somebody. For she too is a mother in the Bible, and she deserves our attention. She is an enslaved young Egyptian woman, a maid servant to Sarai. Her life is not her own. She didn't choose to be Sarah's personal slave. She didn't choose to live her life shackled by the demands of her owners. She didn't choose to bear a child to cover for Abram and Sarai's barrenness. She had no choice. All of this was forced upon her by the culture she lived in. Like so many enslaved black women in our own shameful history. It's no wonder she felt hostile towards her master when she discovered that she was pregnant. But that only made matters worse because Sarah dealt harshly with Hagar. And so Hagar did what enslaved people do when they have reached the limits, when they can't take it any longer. They run away. She ran away. It's the same with so many in our history. The same with the wives of Boko Haram, forced to become enslaved wives to terrorists. They too, if given a chance, will flee. It's not easy to be a mother in those circumstances. The Chibok girls were abducted from their school dorms April 14th, 2014, 10 years ago. 276 girls were abducted from this little town in the middle of nowhere, Chibok, an early Brethren mission station. 276 girls were abducted that night. 80 to 100, 10 years later, remain unaccounted for. In fact, South Waterloo Church of the Brethren, my previous pastorate, still has her, Mary Amor, on their prayer list. 10 years they've been praying for her welfare, unknowing what her status is, whether she's even alive. Those who initially escaped, particularly those that night and those in the early days of their captivity, they were embraced when they came back into their communities. But those who became wives and mothers and bore children from their terrorist husbands did not find it easy at all. When they fled and returned home, they were shunned by their own communities, looked upon as dirty, colluding with their captors. Honest to goodness, I just recently heard from BBC, I heard of one Chibok girl who found it so hard to live back home, she left home and returned to the Sambisa forest, only to find that her husband was killed, and another terrorist took her as one of his other wives. Can you imagine the despair that she felt in the wilderness, with no place to turn, feeling no significance at all in this world today? Motherhood is not easy. Now, if they had a Mother's Day celebration back there in that day, would Hagar feel like celebrating? Would Abram recognize Mother's Day by giving Hagar a box of chocolates and a dozen roses and a meal out at Red Lobster? What about Sarah? She's the one who would demand a Mother's Day celebration, leaving Hagar at home to babysit, sweep, and mop the floors. And so, during that particular Mother's Day celebration, Hagar runs away. Can you blame her? And in the wilderness, God finds her. She has this conversation with God, the longest recorded conversation between a woman and God in the Old Testament. Hagar is also the only woman in the Bible who gives God a name. She names God Elroy, not Leroy, Elroy, which means in Hebrew, the God who sees me. Hagar flees from an untenable situation. And what happens? There in the wilderness, there in the desert, she runs right smack dab into God. And isn't that how it is? Isn't that how it is with each of us? You reach the end of your rope, nowhere to turn, hopeless and despairing, trying to run away from it all, and God meets you right then and there. As Hilary Price writes, Hagar doesn't know what she wants. She knows what she doesn't want. She doesn't want to be treated as a non-person, as an invisible person. She doesn't realize her greatest need until she meets the God who meets that need. And she names him Elroy, the God who sees me. You know, the Bible lists names for God, different names for God. Here are a few. Elohim, the Creator God. Yahweh, the covenant maker God. El Shaddai, the Almighty God. Adonai, the Lord of Lords. But you know the truth. The truth about that is God's name carries very little meaning to those who've never experienced God. It's just a name. Who cares? And so when God spoke to Hagar in the middle of the desert, this experience above all experiences she's ever experienced, she just had to name it. She named it Elroy, the God who sees me. There is something so important, so vital about being seen in human nature. You don't really understand human nature unless you know why a child on a merry-go-round will wave at his parents every time around. And why his parents will always wave back every time around, right? You've done it. Hey, hey. To be seen and to be known is essential. When someone sees you eyeball to eyeball, it conveys a sense of value and significance. And how much more then when God is seeing you? The psalmist says the same thing. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all of my ways. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How lovely is that? How significant is that? How much value do you place on yourself when you read these words that God has seen me? Hagar, the immigrant from Africa, an Egyptian slave to Jewish masters, felt overworked and undervalued. Her life was an endless cycle of tasks performed for her masters, a slave to do their bidding. Go collect firewood, go fetch water, cook the meals, wash the clothes, be there for your master in the middle of the night, raise his children, bear the brunt of Sarah's harsh treatment. Could anyone feel less significant than Hagar? And yet in the darkest, most hopeless hour, the God who sees her lifts her up, changes everything. Hagar, you are somebody. Say it with me. Hagar, you are somebody. You are significant. You are loved. You are valued. You belong. God sees her and saves her. So what difference does it make to know that God sees you and is present with you? What difference does it make that your God, Elohim, El Shaddai, Elroy, is there for you? It makes all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. Hagar longed to be loved, longed to be valued. No one around her could satisfy that. God did. Let's make sure that doesn't happen to our loved ones. When your children demand your attention, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, look at me, watch me. Look at them, even if it's 1,000 times a day. Well, maybe not 1,000. 950 times a day. When you meet other family members, co-workers, friends, church members, those in the checkout line, look at them eyeball to eyeball, because they need to know that they are loved and significant and are of value. So let's be gentle with one another this Mother's Day. Let's look and see those moms with happy families and recognize them. But let's also look and see moms who have passed on. Let's look at those moms who have lost children, moms who wish they had children, single moms trying their best to raise their kids, the moms who, for whatever reason, are doing a kind of a poor job in raising their family because of their own demons. They're just doing the best they can. We see you. God sees you. You are loved. You are valued. You are God's own. You are God's beloved.